What up? Little shorter one today, because all we have to do is go over part 3 of the book. Intro thing. Alright, part 3 of the Uniquely Human book. One thing that I guess it made me realize I have mutism in dreams. There's a section around page 245 where they're discussing kind of the concept of mutism and what's happening to people who experience that. And I realized that I have this occur in stressful dreams where I go to try and physically make sound, like I'm trying to speak or communicate, and it just, I breathe in all of my breath to yell out, and all I get out is, and it's just, I don't know, it's always been such a powerless feeling. Page 261 has a section stressing the difference between interdependence and independence. And this is kind of a fundamental political conceit of our time since Hobbes almost, right? So Hobbes introduces the idea that basically what we're doing as people is sacrificing a lot of our natural liberty because in nature, the world is just so simply violent and unforgiving that we're not going to cut it out there. We need to make some concessions in order to stay safe. And so those concessions are what we accept as the limitations of living within society. And that, let me think of how to bridge that. Well, I guess it's just that it's wrong, right? So that this is a fundamentally inaccurate picture of what it's like to endure in nature as humans in a group, right? We're not just constantly being picked off by Mother Nature, just like there's 2 left and that's it. These communities end up thriving over thousands of years because of their interdependence. And if they were independent in the way that Hobbes wanted us to believe, that longevity probably wouldn't be present. So in the book, he's making the point that you should move to a place where you see yourself as interacting in dependent ways with other people in your community, as opposed to just being a force off in the woods by yourself. And an easy example of how I can, just an easy example of this, these people, these are basically people who claim to be independent are people who are claiming, I am not dependent upon the road infrastructure that I took to get into my job today. I am not dependent on the people who grow all of my food because I don't grow any of my food. I'm not dependent on a water purification facility. Yeah, you fucking are. You sure fucking are. Next note is just that at 265, all I had in this one was just to reiterate that my family would always treat me like I had an intellectual disability even when I didn't. And that always hurt. There was a thing I disagreed with here on 275. This quote, people can no longer say they think they know what I want without asking me and giving me time to provide an answer. And I just straight up disagree with that. They have lost the justification for doing so, but the behavior won't stop. That's what my experience is that when this behavior is directed at you, they might come to a point where they understand there are reasons why this behavior is unacceptable, but the behavior simply doesn't stop, though. And so in principle, he's right, but in practice, I think what you're going to find is that you remain the target of bullying, even after disclosure. Oh yeah, this is an interesting idea. So page 287, they start talking about where does this idea come from that if the child is happy, then we are acquiescing and doing wrong, right? So they're talking about moving these kids through school life and saying, well, it's not important that they're happy, it's important that they become functional in the way that we want them to. And my note just says, why prioritize anything over happiness? Why would you want to be present in a place where you are truly unhappy? And they're saying, you will be present and you will put in your effort. What would motivate that person to do so? You just failed to address like half of the question. And that's why it's just an issue of compliance, because they straight up haven't given you most of the context here, and then they're just telling you, you're going to do it right now with that explanation, you're getting punished. That's not relationship. That's just command. That's control. That's not people in community. That is the exercise of social power. I have a note here that just says, what energizes the spirit? He's talking about this native elder in New Zealand telling him, don't forget how important it is to energize the spirit, basically. What does that mean, to energize the spirit? How do you do that? I think you would need to let it express things. I think the energized spirit is one that can make expressions, even large or loud ones, without being seen as repellent. I think an energized spirit is one in which we say, look at the energy it exudes, in place of, ew, what is it doing? Why is it doing that? I don't do that, so it shouldn't do that. What energizes the spirit? I think, letting it communicate. I think that's how you let energy pass to it, would be to pass a message to it. And then you would let it pass a message back, and that in the transfer there and back, that is what would constitute the communicative act. So I think what energizes the spirit is almost interacting with it. And the way that people will just kind of refuse to fucking interact with you is a de-energization of the spirit. Yeah, the way that they're just like, no, I'm not going to be making any kind of connection with a person like you. And that's what stuck out to me about that section, was the idea that, it's so crucial to energize spirits. And in my experience, that just no one cares. You're just the fucking target. Anyway, so that's off the dome reviews of all 3 parts of that book. What I'm going to start doing next is assembling a little like essay script, basically. And I'm going to be making a review of the book, not with the intent of general autism advocacy and not with any other intent than just me advocacy. I want to talk about how this book affected me and how I reflect on it, and not about how it is positioned in a greater context, because that's not I don't know about that, right? I don't know enough about the current constellation of contemporary research to place it like that. So what I can do is say what it did to me when I read it. So that's what I'm going to be doing in that what do you call it, book review. We have an end credit thing now. Here it is.